Discover the sinister secrets of a cursed village. 4K Exposé of 7 unexplained deaths in chaos. The sun sank beneath the cracked hills of Lonesome Hollow, casting twisted shadows that danced like restless souls. From the moment Jamie Harris stepped out of her rental car, a chill snaked down her spine, whispering warnings of the horrors concealed by the friendly smiles of her childhood neighbors. They had all come to know the grim tale: 7 bodies dug into the earth over the last 30 years, each death more inexplicable than the last. Tonight, that history would become the center of her investigation, but the foreboding air in this cursed town felt electric, charged with a fear that screamed for escape. Old Mrs. Whitaker waved from her porch, idyllic home surrounded by vibrant flowers. Yet, her smile was a taut mask against the shadows lurking in her sunken eyes. What twisted truths lay beneath that exterior? As Jamie approached, Mrs. Whitaker's whisper caught in her throat. The air soured, hinting at secrets too dark to share. "Be careful, Jamie," she murmured, shivering despite the warm glow of the evening. "They'll come for you too." Just then, a shriek tore through the sky, a piercing cry that ricocheted off the hills. Jamie's heart raced. When she turned back to Mrs. Whitaker, the woman had vanished, leaving an unsettling silence that echoed her name. Shadows shifted in the corners of her vision, dark tendrils reaching toward her, coaxing her deeper into the heart of darkness. Around town, chatter thrived about the supposed curse, words mingling with an unshakable dread. As she cornered her old high school acquaintance, George, regarding the 7th victim, his face went pale. "Every week, it's another one," he stammered. "People around here, they know it's not random." The murmurs escalated, sending adrenaline rushing through Jamie's veins. Whispers of her father's name ignited worry in George's gaze. What had her estranged father done that still haunted this place? "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. With each nightfall, the paranoia seeped deeper, clawing at her sanity. Crows flocked above, circling ominously, as if they were the town's harbingers of death. Jamie approached the council meeting, sweaty palms gripping her notebook. The tension in the room was palpable, vibrating like electric current. As the chair began to speak, Jamie interrupted, demanding answers about the deaths. The council members, once respectable figures, now wore sinister smirks that chilled her blood. Were they complicit in this nightmare? Just then, an avalanche of cause erupted, darkening the sky as if the atmosphere erupted with malevolent fury. A spine-chilling wail echoed from the woods, amplifying the dread in the air. Hearts raced, faces turned ashen. Jamie's vision blurred, but she realized she must dig deeper, or risk becoming another victim of the shadows nesting in the town. Then, like a snake striking, a notification pinged on her screen. A video appeared, casting her family as prime suspects in a curse woven through generations. Reality twisted, the revelation spinning around her like the crows overhead. Who could she trust when even her own blood might conspire against her? With every beat, the night pressed closer, wrapping its terrifying tendrils around her as she raced against a darkness only just waking. How much time did she have before the town's curse consumed her too? Jamie's breath caught in her throat. This time, the past wound remained buried. The air was thick with questions, and she had only just begun to scratch the surface of the sinister truth buried beneath her roots. The wind howled outside, a banshee's wail that twisted through the cracked windows of the council building. Jamie felt the chill wrap around her like a damp shroud, squeezing her lungs tighter with every breath. The council members continued to grin, their eyes devoid of warmth. Each stare felt like a knife, carving away at her resolve. Beneath their polished facades lay something sinister, a conspiracy that chilled her blood. "Is this some kind of joke?" Jamie shouted, her voice breaking the tense silence. The room froze. She could hear her heart pounding in her ears. She had come looking for answers, not to challenge fragile nerves, yet ignorance had become a far worse enemy. Mrs. Whittaker's warning echoed in her mind. They'll come for you too. Who were they? Were they the town's leaders, the faceless entities lurking just out of sight, or something more primal, born of the village's dark past? Leave while you still can, a voice rasped from the back. Old Mr. Jenkins, a former mayor who had always looked like he had secrets to hide. The room turned to him, eyes wide, yet he only grinned, the corners of his mouth curling up in mockery. Jamie's instinct screamed at her even as a gnawing dread rooted her to the floor. This was no mere town meeting. A skittering sound came from the back, like nails against stone. Jamie jerked her head towards the darkness that clung to the corners of the room. It grew heavier, more oppressive, making it difficult to breathe. The lighting flickered, pulsing like a heartbeat, and the shadows deepened, almost as if they were alive. Are we being watched? She choked, scanning the room. Is this part of whatever twisted game you're playing? Ma's got plans, child, George said, his face pale, but there was a fire in his eyes. If you keep digging, it won't just be your father they'll come for. His warning hung in the air like a death knell. A sudden crash echoed outside, followed by the unmistakable caw of the crows, louder and angrier now. Jamie's heartbeat quickened, matching the chaos breeding in the dark. The council members' expressions hardened, shifting from amusement to something darker, a fear of exposure. What do you know? Jamie pressed, stepping toward the high table, defiance fueling every step. About my father, about the curse? Old Mr. Jenkins leaned forward, each word sharp as ice. It begins with forgetting, and it ends with the hollow ground, child. Your family was part of it, whether you like it or not. He chuckled dryly, but there was no humor in it. His gaze fell somewhere beyond her, into shadows thick with unspoken order. A flicker of desperation crossed George's eyes, and with a quick movement, he pulled Jamie aside. You need to get out before it's too late. They're not just going to watch you disappear, they'll revel in it. Wait. What do you mean? Jamie felt her heart plummet. Had she stepped into a trap larger than she understood? The growing storm outside matched the unease thrumming through her. Before she could ask further, a chilling howl echoed through the village, silencing all. Suddenly, a figure darted past the windows, dark and swift, disappearing into the night. Jamie's pulse quickened. What was out there? Were the crows circling above just a warning, or the harbingers of her fate? I have to go, Jamie declared, fear mingling with determination. But the moment she turned, the lights flickered violently and went out, plunging them all into darkness. A gasp erupted from the crowd, and Jamie felt the weight of their stares pressing in on her. The silence that followed was suffocating. Something was very wrong. Could her investigation really be the spark that ignited a darker truth? The door behind her swung open with a creak, revealing nothing but inky blackness. The air grew thick with tension as a low growl echoed from within. Jamie George's whisper was choked with terror, words faltering as if fear had caught in his throat. With nowhere else to turn, Jamie took a deep breath and stepped towards the dark, determined to confront whatever shapes the night had cast. But what waited for her would change everything she thought she knew about Lonesome Hollow and herself. The air clamped around Jamie as she stepped into the void. Her instinct screamed for her to retreat, yet an urge and almost magnetic pull dragged her forward. Shadows swirled, thickened, wrapping around her like gnarled fingers. The growl echoed again, deeper and resonating from nowhere, yet it was everywhere at once. She forced herself to move, one foot in front of the other, heart hammering with dread. Who's there? She called, voice trembling but defiant. Silence. The darkness seemed to breathe, alive and hungry. Jamie squinted, straining her eyes. Just beyond her reach, faint shapes flickered in the blackness, twisted figures shifting in a dance that chilled her to the bone. Was it her imagination, or were they watching her, hungry and ready to pounce? Then, she remembered the council members, their grins masking grotesque intent. She shivered. Were they part of this malevolence? What had they locked away in the dark? A rustling sound began, a whisper, barely audible, curling around her mind like smoke. Jamie, your blood. The voice slithered through the air, wrapping around her like a vice. It was familiar yet foreign, tugging at memories she couldn't quite grasp. "Shut up!" she cried out, but the voice only grew louder. The phrase twisted in her ears until it was nothing more than a maddened chant, weaving through a tapestry of fragmented echoes. And then, a flickered dim light broke through the darkness. Jamie's breath hitched as she spotted figures in the far corner, faces pale and blank, eyes wide and unblinking. The glow illuminated old Mr. Jenkins, his grin stretching unnaturally across his face. Beside him stood others, gaunt and hunched, trembling like spectral marionettes. "Join us," Jamie, one of them hissed, their voice a chaotic whisper. "Embrace the truth, get away from me." She spat, heart racing as confusion swirled in her mind. The council was not just composed of men and women holding office, they were something much darker, something long since rotted beneath Lonesome Hollow. Just then, the wind howled louder than before, a banshee's wail that tore through the thin walls of the building and rattled the very bones of its foundation. The figure next to Jenkins lunged forward, rasping, "Ma's waiting for you, the curse demands a sacrifice." A wave of terror crashed over her. Sacrifice? Was this what they wanted? A pawn in their sick game? The dim light flickered and died. Panic surged in her chest as darkness engulfed her anew. She stumbled backward, and something cold brushed against her skin. Jamie froze. A hand? No, a clawed, twisted appendage. She jerked away and collided with something solid, another figure, this one more substantial than the shadows. She could feel its breath, hot and rancid, swirling around her as it beckoned her closer. The stench of decay was overpowering, a miasma that clawed at her throat. "Leave her be." George's voice surged through the void, raw and frantic. "Run, Jamie." But how? Fear kept her rooted, heavy like stone. What was waiting beyond the dark, the things that lurked just outside her vision? And worse, what would happen if she fell prey to the curse? Would she become just another whisper on the winds of Lonesome Hollow? Can they hold back whatever was moving in the shadows? She pushed everything down deep, hiding the terror that threatened to overwhelm her. Jamie's heart pounded in her ears as the darkness closed in tighter. "Get out. They're coming for you." At that, she made a choice, propelled by the urgency of survival. She sprinted toward the door, the world tilting as she fought against the suffocating shadows. But as she reached for the handle, it slammed shut, sealing her in. A guttural growl echoed, shaking the walls around her. Jamie's breath quickened, and she turned back, heart pounding, realizing that the true game was about to begin. But what price would she have to pay to escape? In that moment of despair, she understood something far worse waited ahead, ready to seize her. As clawing shadows twisted toward her, she heard the chilling whisper again, taunting and relentless, "Welcome home, Jamie." What horrors lay in store as the veil of Lonesome Hollow thinned? Would Jamie uncover the truth before it was too late? A sudden wave of icy breath swept over Jamie, wrapping her in a cold embrace that paralyzed her for just a moment longer. The shadowy figures inched closer, their hollow eyes watching her every move, waiting for her to falter, to collapse under the weight of her fear. Jamie closed her eyes, hoping to wake from this nightmare, but the putrid stench of decay forced her to confront the gruesome reality. "Where are you?" She heard her own voice cracking, a desperate plea more than a question. But the darkness responded with only silence. It was as if the shadows were humored by her plight, enjoying the panic that spread across her face and the swirling gloom. She strained to listen for George, the last flicker of hope in this hellish nightmare. "George!" she cried, her voice trembling but steady. The shadows lurked, and with them, the memory of the council, its bloodied legacy whispered in the air thick with dread. "Do you want to know what lies within?" Mr. Jenkins' voice came again, mocking, slithering like a serpent in the dark. "The Maw sees all. It knows you." The lights flashed momentarily, revealing horrendous shapes, contorted faces expressing a sinister mixture of hunger and longing. She could feel their intentions, raw and insatiable, a desperate desire to feast on her terror. Summoning every ounce of strength, Jamie inched backwards, searching for a way out. The shadows shifted, reconfiguring themselves, blocking her escape. They whispered her name over and over, repeating it like a ritualistic chant. Jamie. Jamie. Then she saw it, a sliver of light breaking through the suffocating darkness, a narrow passage behind the figures, hidden from her initial sight. Can I make it? Her heart pounded, but she could feel the shadows stretching toward her, wanting her, reaching out with clawed fingers. Run. The word jolted her alive again. George's voice cut through her paralysis like a knife, igniting a flicker of determination. Jamie turned and bolted toward the soft glow, weaving through a maze of grotesque figures. Each step felt like a battle, as if the ground were determined to hold her back. The growl echoed in protest, a sound she felt deep within her bones. They won't let you go. It warned, but she didn't stop. Not now. The shadows screeched in frustration, their claws whipping through the air just inches away, grazing her skin like a warning. The passage was close, she could reach it. Just a little farther. She urged herself, sweat stinging her eyes. She could see George, fumbling in the light, his expression a mix of fear and urgency. She pushed herself harder. Jamie's lungs burned, but she wouldn't give up now. The shadows screeched, a symphony of rage and despair, but she reached the opening, squeezing through. She felt weightless for a heartbeat, until a hampering weight shackled her waist, dragging her back home into the maw. With a cry, Jamie yanked herself free, bursting into the cold night air outside. The sudden silence enveloped her, the cacophony of shadows fading into a haunting whisper. But as she looked back, every face she had seen within the dark was now etched into her memory, scarred into her soul, waiting just a breath behind the veil of reality. They were always watching. Stay away from them. George shouted, pulling her further into the night. They won't stop until they get what they want. What do they want? She gasped. He paused, eyes wide with something terrifying. They want you, Jamie, and they'll stop at nothing to drag you back. The stillness wrapped around them, but Jamie could feel it, the darkness surfacing beneath, echoing with sinister tales. Lonesome Hollow was alive, waiting, hungry. A distant howl broke the stillness, sending chills up her spine. She turned, realization descending upon her. They had just begun. What awaited in the shadows? Would Jamie find the key to break the curse, or would she become yet another tale of Lonesome Hollow? George dragged Jamie through the dense, fog-wreathed trees, where shadows shifted and flickered like forgotten ghosts. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, but dread clawed at her heart. Each step was a frantic effort to distance herself from the malevolence lurking behind. Keep moving. George urged, his grip tightening. The whispers followed them, wrapping around their ankles like spectral chains. They echoed in the twilight, a haunting chorus that seemed to surge with every stride. Jamie, each utterance pulled her back, trying to reel her into that dark void. What do they want from me? She barely managed to breathe the words, panic pulsing like a drum in her chest. George hesitated, glancing back as if the very trees might offer the secrets they sought. They want your fear. You're a beacon to them. They want to devour it. A surge of ice crept down her spine. Devour my fear? Yes. It's how they survive, he sputtered, urgency injecting his words with a frantic energy. We need to find the old library. There are records, old tales woven into the very fabric of this village. It might tell us how to stop them. An old library? The thought flickered through her mind, a fragile thread. But something darker pulsed around them, and suddenly, the path behind them grew darker, deeper. The shadows coalesced, taking form, watching, waiting. The trees began to warp, bending unnaturally. Their gnarled branches twisted like clawed fingers, reaching for Jamie and George. Panic exploded in her chest. This way. She pulled George left, her instincts kicking in, toward a clearing. But as they ran, the distance widened, and the shadows shaped into grotesque faces that grinned hungrily, their hollow eyes gleaming. Join us, Jamie, they sang, their voices drizzling into her mind like honey, thick and unyielding. Don't listen. George yelled, his words barely piercing through the mounting dread. Racing into the clearing, they halted. A chilling wind howled, wrapping around them like a shroud, revealing a rundown building half buried in the earth, a mausoleum of forgotten knowledge, the Library of Lonesome Hollow. The wooden sign creaked, swinging from rusted chains, the letters spelling out knowledge is power, an ominous warning cloaked in irony. Here. This is it. George pulled her toward the entrance, but the door stood ajar like a mouth ready to swallow them whole. Ice clutched at Jamie's heart again. What if it's worse inside? Nobody's watching us here, Jamie. We'll be safe, I promise. Swallowing her fear, she pushed forward. The air inside was stale, thick with dust and secrets long forgotten. The dim light struggled to penetrate the gloom, revealing books stacked high like tombstones. As they ventured deeper, George brushed his fingers along the spines, his expression shifting from hope to horror. These books, they're all accounts of those who disappeared, Jamie gasped, her heart racing. Like the council? Worse, George whispered, his voice trembling. They all listened and eventually, they were called. She barely had time to process his words when the shadows seeped into their sanctuary. Tendrils snaked around her ankles, dragging her toward a darkness unvisited, a feast of nightmares waiting patiently. She clawed at the floor, desperate, the weight of despair pressing down on her. No. Please. But just then, an old book fell from the shelf, crashing to the floor with an ominous thud. A title caught her eye, The Maw's Gift. George grabbed it, staring at it like it held the secrets of the universe. This could be it, Jamie. It might explain how to escape. As he opened it, the shadows paused, as if they understood the importance of this moment. But a voice chilled the air. You shouldn't have come here. They turned, and there standing amongst the stacks was a figure cloaked in darkness, its eyes burning with an insatiable hunger. Time's up, it rasped, the room growing darker, tighter. With a gasp, Jamie realized the answer wasn't in the pages. It was in the terror that bound her to this forsaken place. What had they awakened? As darkness enveloped them, an ultimatum hung in the air, thick as the shadows circling, suffocating. The maw was closing in. Would they uncover the truth in time, or would Lonesome Hollow claim them as it had claimed so many before? The shadows writhed around them, a living shroud that pulsed with an insatiable hunger. George clutched the book tighter, his knuckles white, a flicker of hope battling the rising tide of despair. Jamie could feel the weight of the darkness tightening, suffocating her thoughts. What do you want from us? What do we have that you need? Her voice fractured under the pressure, desperation spilling into the air. The cloaked figure stepped closer, its deep-set eyes glinting like coals. You are the light in the dark, and darkness craves only the light. It leaned forward, almost as if it were tasting the air between them. You both have come too far to turn back now. George glanced at Jamie, his face pale and drawn. We need to read the book. It has to hold something we can use, something we can know. The figure shrieked, its voice reverberating like thunder through the stacks. The air turned oppressive, the shadows coiling tighter around them. Blocked exits screamed a stark reality. Panic burst within Jamie like a wild animal. With a sudden motion, George flipped the ancient pages, tearing through the dust and decay. Words leapt off the parchment, unsettling visions flickering across Jamie's mind, faces twisted in agony, cries of terror echoing in the recesses of her memory. The maw demands sacrifice, he read, trembling. It consumes all who dwell here. The figure laughed, a sound both chilling and hollow. Their desires, their fears, they feed the maw. You're too late, the cycle must continue. Jamie's heart raced. George, we can't let this happen. We have to find a way to break it. She reached for the book, stretching her fingers, desperate to see the next page. You think strength lies in the pages? The figure snarled. The real truth lies in the offering of souls. They listened, and they were taken. So shall you be. Then Jamie felt a weight pulling at her mind, like chains dropping heavy around her feet. Vivid memories surged, shadows of childhood nightmares resurrected, nights spent frozen in fear, concealing her secrets. Take it. Jamie screamed, knowing what she held, the very essence of her terror, cloaked in innocence. Fool. The cloaked figure hissed. Do you think the maw desires mere fear? It hungers for the ultimate despair. George's eyes were wide, understanding dawning. Jamie, you can't. We must hold on to something. But Jamie was already teetering on the edge of a decision that twisted inside her. If I don't face this, we'll never escape. Your power, feed it. The words slipped from her lips like poison, the wickedness within the maw amplifying her vulnerability. The shadows thickened around them, eager tendrils slithering up her legs, grasping at her waist, ready to claim her. Do it! She exclaimed, conviction roaring in her chest. Let me stand against it. The dark figure recoiled, shock washing over its features. You think you can defy me? You have nothing. I will take all of you. Just then, the lights flickered in the dim room. It was eerie, those faint glimmers begging her to find hope. Fight it, Jamie! George shouted, determination fueling his voice. The shadows began to writhe suddenly, fighting against the light that in that moment, Jamie felt a fire ignite within her. There was power in the fear and upside-down strength to confront the darkness. I will not be a puppet to your hunger. She roared, the shadows recoiling as if stung, but as the pulse of potential surged between them, the figure laughed maniacally, its eyes lighting up like a ravenous inferno. Then let us see how far you will fall, dear Jamie. The ground trembled, books crashing to the floor, dust swirling like a tempest. Jamie and George stumbled, and in the chaos, the book slipped from George's fingers, pages tearing free, more shadows pouring out, screaming for attention as they twisted in the AIR.AS. The terror intensified. Jamie had an idea, but it lodged like a splinter in her mind. Would they fulfill the maw's cruel thirst, or could they trap it? In stark contrast to hope, time was running out. The darkness surged forth, ready to swallow them. No! George yelled, grabbing her arm, eyes imploring. What if your plan fails? But Jamie had already leaped into action. Then we'll face the darkness together. And just like that, an explosion of shadows crashed into them, an avalanche that left them gasping in its wake, caught between determination and despair. What would they awaken next? Would they find the deadly secret in time, or would the shadows consume their very souls? The air strained with monstrous energy as Jamie and George were pulled deeper into the tempest. Shadows wrapped around them like a living blanket, their grip unyielding. Jamie gasped, adrenaline coursing through her veins, her mind racing with fear. Keep your eyes on the light. She shouted, forcing the words past the constriction in her throat. George's face was set, a mask of determination laced with dread. They had become the unwitting players in a cruel game. As darkness crashed around them, old whispers coiled up from the depths of the shadows. They clawed at the edges of her consciousness, threatening to drag her into a well of memories she had tried to seal away. But this was no time for her past, it was time to confront the creature lurking inside the maw that feasted on her despair. Stay close. George shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. The shadows writhed in agreement, their indistinct forms seeming to pulse with malicious intent. An unholy hunger radiated from the cloaked figure, an insidious echo of their own fears. Did you think you could challenge the maw? It sneered, advancing, an overwhelming presence that loomed larger and darker. It knows you, Jamie, your secrets, your pain, they are delicacies I shall savor. Jamie clenched her fists. No. I want to let you take me like the others. She turned to George, feeling their connection like an electric current amid the chaos. We have to fight back. Look. George pointed, and for a fleeting moment, a sliver of hope glimmered in the swirling darkness. Above them, a flickering light seemed to emanate from the pages that lay scattered around, a glow like stars in an encroaching void. They were not just words, they were vessels of power. They can help us if we can channel their energy. Jamie's desperation ignited her spirit as she lunged for a nearby page, her heart pounding like a war drum. The dark figure shrieked, its voice shattering the air. You'll be consumed before you unleash that power. It lunged toward them, its shadowy form stretching impossibly long, stretching to snuff out their flicker of defiance. George grasped Jamie's hand tightly, grounding her in the moment. Together, now! He shouted, even as panic clawed at him. The page Jamie held pulsed beneath her fingers, resonating with the light they both sought. Images erupted from it, whirlwinds of memories and sightings, a glimpse of lost souls snared by the maw, faces twisted in eternal agony. It was a warning and a call to rally. Make it burn. George urged, his voice a steady anchor amid their chaotic surroundings, channeling everything they had, every ounce of grief, anger, and pain. Jamie let the memory of her fears twist into something more. Terror became fury, darkness turned to light, and wailing from the pages joined their surge for survival. The shadows around them began to unravel, fraying at the seams. Yet in that surge of power, the cloaked figure roared, undeterred. You think you can break the bond? You cannot kill what feeds on despair. The maw is eternal. The very ground under their feet began to shake violently. An unseen force surged to counteract their newfound strength, pushing back with merciless intent. No! Jamie cried. We won to let you win. The dazzling light between Jamie and George expanded, blanketing them like a shield. Then, just as quickly, a scream erupted from the figure, raw and tortured, shaking the darkness to its core. But it did not shatter, it morphed. As the shadows ramped up their assault, Jamie caught fragmented glimpses of those who had come before. Distorted faces cried out, grasping for salvation. In that moment of clarity, horror coiled deep within her. It wants us to be like them, she gasped, fear a fierce edge against her heart. Before the terror could swallow them whole, George pulled her close. Not if we resist. With one final force of will, they drove the light forward, shattering the darkness's grip like glass. But just as hope threatened to break through, the floor gave way beneath them, darkness swallowing their cries as they plunged into an unknown abyss. What would they awaken in the depths? Would it be salvation or something far worse lurking beneath? Falling felt endless, as if they were trapped in a nightmarish freefall, gravity unwilling to relent. It was cold and dark, a creeping chill that seeped into their bones. Jamie's heart hammered against her chest. She had no idea how far they were dropping. It felt like forever and a moment all at once. George! She screamed, panic clawing at her throat. She reached out, desperately trying to latch onto something, anything. Hold on. His voice pierced the silence like a lifeline in the void. In the murky dark, she could barely see him, but she felt his presence, their fingers brushing and weaving together in an instinctual grasp. Then, with a bone-jarring thud, they hit the ground. It wasn't a cushiony landing, it was hard and merciless, the impact rattling through Jamie like thunder. Are you okay? George's voice trembled, breathless. She nodded, though pain shot up her leg. Surrounded by darkness thicker than before, they struggled to adjust their eyes. A faint, ghostly illumination flickered on the periphery, casting eerie shadows that danced along the jagged walls of their new prison. What is this place? Jamie breathed, her voice low and hushed, each word hanging heavy in the air. The oppressive atmosphere vibrated with an unsettling energy, whispering secrets just out of reach. With every step, the noises of the shadows seemed to grow louder, a cacophony of disembodied voices murmuring ancient sorrows and forgotten fears. George leaned closer, narrowing his eyes at the light. This place feels wrong. It's like it's alive. Before Jamie could respond, the flickering illuminated object came into focus. It was a large, weathered tome, pages flipping on their own like a breath of wind had caught it. The light spilled from it, pulsating and beckoning like a siren song, drawing them in. Should we open it? She asked, hesitation lining her voice. George shrugged, the resolve spreading across his features despite the lingering unease. We have to, right? It's our only chance. With a deep breath that stirred the heavy air, Jamie reached for the tome. As soon as her fingers grazed the cover, the whispers intensified, swirling around them in a malevolent tempest, an audible gasp from unseen entities. In that moment, an image flashed in her mind. A village. Shadows of people flickered like ghosts against a familiar backdrop. Screams echoed, followed by silence. Death. Pain. The village was bound in an unending cycle of despair, and in it, figures loomed, watching, waiting, hungry. Jamie. Focus. George urged, shaking her from the grip of terror around her heart. She forced her attention back to the book, flipping through pages filled with jagged script and haunting illustrations. It spoke of the Maw, an entity that sought the suffering of humans as sustenance, trapping their spirits in endless torment. Look. George pointed, eyes wide. It says here that the Maw feeds on grief, on those who are burdened with loss. Panic ignited in Jamie's gut. It wants us to take their place. That's why we fell here. We were brought here to feed it. A shadow loomed behind them, grotesque and roiling, ominous tendrils stretching forth. You're not meant to leave, it hissed, the voice dripping with malice. It absorbed the light around them, smothering it. The whispers turned into wails, clawing at Jamie's mind, dredging up every lost moment, every cherished face snatched away. She could feel tears slipping down her cheeks, the weight of sorrow pulling her toward the abyss of despair. Fight it. George's voice surged with raw urgency. He squeezed her hand tightly, rallying her back from the brink. We can't let it win. They faced the shadow together, an unyielding wall of defiance. With desperation fueling her spirit, Jamie shouted the names of those she lost, wielding memories like a sword. They may be gone, but they are not forgotten. The figure hesitated, reeling back, the light from the pages flaring with renewed intensity. But Jamie could see its fury building, rage swelling like an approaching storm. What if we can't defeat it? George asked, breathless. Fear lurking beneath his confidence. We have to. Jamie's heart thundered. We have no choice. The darkness lunged at them as one final scream echoed agonizing, feral. They would wake or be consumed, the line between existence and oblivion growing thinner by the second. But as they braced for the final confrontation, the chilling realization hit her. There were more secrets buried beneath the surface and not all was as it seemed. What unseen force awaited them in the darkness? Would they uncover truths that shatter everything they believed? The room shuddered as the shadow recoiled, the air thick with palpable tension. Jamie and George stood their ground, hearts racing, breaths shallow. Every instinct told them to flee, but the invisible chains of fear rooted them to the spot. With the whispered wails around them growing louder, each syllable felt like a ticking clock counting down to their doom. What do we do now? George's voice trembled, but an edge of determination flickered within his eyes. They were in this together, and giving in was not an option. Jamie glanced at the tome, its pages vibrating with energy. We keep reading. There must be something in here that can help us. Some way to I don't know if there's enough time. The foreboding shadow lurked closer, tendrils swaying like hungry serpents, ready to devour their souls. Jamie felt its icy breath against her skin, a reminder of the unyielding despair it fed on. Focus on the names. Jamie shouted, clutching George's hand tighter. We have to remember them. All of them. As they chanted the names of their loved ones, Jamie felt warmth bloom in the cold darkness, a flicker of hope in the void. With each name, the whispers grew softer, almost reverent, as if they, too, were recognizing the echoes of the past. But the shadow, furious and unrelenting, surged forward, a tempest in the night. Keep going. George urged, and they pressed on, invoking memories of laughter, love, and light that had once filled their lives. Glaring images flashed before her, birthday cakes with melting candles, road trips under sun-soaked skies, a comforting hug that could ease any sorrow. Suddenly, the shadows seemed to pulse, and a memory jolted through Jamie, her grandmother's warning about the Maw, about the hunger it represented. It's not just loss. It feasts on despair. Despair, George echoed, each syllable heavy with understanding. That's what it wants us to feel. If we let it in, we become part of its darkness. The realization struck like lightning. The Maw needed their grief to survive, it thrived on hopelessness. But what if they turned that hunger against it? Think of the love we had. Fight back with that. Jamie yelled, her voice steadying. She released the fear that gripped her heart, replacing it with defiance. We have to outshine it. The shadow hesitated, confusion mingling with rage. Jamie could feel her ancestors' love surging through her veins. You can't take this from us. You aren't strong enough. George joined her, launching into a verse learned in childhood. In memory, we stand. Love will always conquer. The incantation rippled through the air, wrapping them like a shield, blending with the ancient energy emanating from the book. The shadow writhed, shrieking in visceral fury. Their combined memories began to burn against the darkness, sending flashes of light that pierced its woolly silhouette. But just as they felt heat rising, just as victory seemed within reach, an unexpected rumble reverberated through the ground beneath them. Tremors shook the focus, and the tome began to collapse in on itself, pages tearing as if desperate to escape. No! Jamie cried out, eyes wide with panic. Not now. The light flickered, dimming with each stutter of the book, and the darkness roared in delight, sensing the growing weakness. An oppressive force clawed at the edges of Jamie's mind, whispers returning, shrieking of failures and losses. Don't let go. George shouted, his grip unwavering. Remember who we are. We can't. The floor cracked beneath them like thin ice, threatening to swallow them whole. With a desperate howl, Jamie gripped the tome tighter, willing it to stabilize. They couldn't give in, they wouldn't be just another sacrifice. But then, in the chaos, Jamie noticed something, a faint drawing on the torn pages. It depicted the village she had seen in her vision, but now it pulsated like a heartbeat, a final plea from those trapped souls. Look at the center, George. She urged, eyes darting frantically. Images blurred, but the hint of a connection began to unfurl. A doorway, a choice, and behind it lay a truth she wasn't ready to face. As darkness and light battled for dominance, Jamie felt an overwhelming urge to uncover the village's mysteries, to confront the very thing that bound them. Are we ready to face what lies behind that door? She wondered aloud, a tremor of fear threading her thoughts, with the ground shaking and shadows waiting to devour them. The answer hung in the air, unspoken yet laden with dread. Would they dare to open that door? And if they did, what terrible secrets awaited on the other side? The tendrils of shadow writhed wildly, hungry for their despair. With the ground trembling beneath them, Jamie and George faced the heart of the darkness again. The flickering tome in Jamie's hands seemed to pulse, resonating with the energy of all they had fought against. Her heart raced faster, time was slipping away. We need to open that door. She shouted, her voice firm against the mounting chaos. Do you really think we can trust whatever waits behind it? George countered, his eyes darting to the swirling darkness. What if it's worse? Right now, it's our only shot, she insisted, steeling herself against the fear. The moth thrives on uncertainty. We must show it our strength. With a shared glance that tethered them against the darkness, they braced themselves for the opening of the unknown. Jamie felt the warmth of their memories, those moments filled with love, and clenched her jaw, drawing upon that emotion. They had souls worth saving, stories worth telling, nicknames and laughter that had once echoed through brighter days. Summoning courage, Jamie placed her hand on the ancient cover. Together, she breathed, her resolve cemented. With trembling hands, she began to pull open the tome, intending to unveil the legacy that lurked within its pages. A gust of wind howled as though the shadows were discontented, sensing the light they were about to release. The darkness pressed against them, eager to snuff out the flicker of hope, but Jamie and George stood their ground. As the cover creaked open, golden light surged forth, illuminating every cranny of darkness. The door began to materialize, a portal into swirling possibilities, flickering a soft white. It shimmered like a distorted reflection in a pond, a gateway to the truth they had sought. Whatever happens, we face it together. George shouted, his grip a rock against temptation. Stepping forward, Jamie's heart raced, colliding with old fears and forgotten memories, but she pushed them away. You don't control me. I remember. She proclaimed, feeling an electric charge course through her veins. This curse ends with us. The air around them crackled as she took the plunge into the light. Shadows shrieked, vibrating in protest, but they couldn't stop what had been set in motion. Jamie's eyes widened as the scene shifted around them, revealing a long-gone memory of Lonesome Hollow bloomed before her. Figures danced, people who had once breathed life into the hollow, laughing, playing, and loving. Their warmth enveloped her like a comforting embrace. But then, just as quickly, their faces twisted, turning to masks of despair, pain etching deeper into their features. They had all been caught in the curse, and now Jamie understood the shackles binding Lonesome Hollow needed to be broken, but it would be up to her to sever the tether. You know what to do. George's voice anchored her as spectral tendrils threatened to pull them apart. It's time to rewrite the ending. Jamie shouted defiantly, channeling her inner strength. With each memory conjured, she wove a tapestry of light, sending warmth rippling through the cold despair. The shadows screamed, recoiling from the flood of brilliance. Jamie could feel the pull of collective sorrow trying to drag her back, but she leaned into their remembered joys and sorrows, refusing to be a puppeteer of their pain any longer. The faces of lost souls converged upon her, cries echoing off every surface. Help us, they whispered, each voice a layer of the burden she once bore. Jamie unleashed the love she held deep within her, a fire against the cold. You are more than your struggle. You are not forgotten. The energy swirled, coalescing into a sphere of vibrant light, expanding outward. It enveloped the shadows and started to purge the darkness. Jamie's breath hitched as she drew on the love of those lost, igniting a whirlwind that swallowed every trace of the in a blinding flash. The shadows unraveled, the fabric of despair unspooling like bad dreams in the dawn's light. Twisted silhouettes howled as the light cascaded down, breaking their hold on Lonesome Hollow. With each pulse of brightness, a swirl of laughter and infinite memories filled the void. Those who had once been taken were starting to come forth, liberated from the curse. Can you feel it? We're winning. George shouted, his voice rising above the chaos. Yes. Jamie cried back, pushing further, determined to fuel the light with hope. We will break open the chains that bind this place. Then, just as they were about to completely vanquish the shadows, a dark figure surged forward, a desperate lunge to reclaim power. It reached for them, but Jamie's vibrant flame roared in response, igniting the entrance before them. It was the final restless grasp of despair to snuff out what light remained, but with instinct, she surged forward. No! She shouted defiantly, her voice filled with conviction. You will not take us. With one last engulfing push, the portal expanded wider, a final cry fueling the last vestiges of resistance. The maw wailed, its shape twisting and distorting until it finally was consumed in the luminous glow. As the storm faded and silence descended, Jamie collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. We did it, she murmured, disbelief coloring her words. George knelt beside her, breathing heavily but alive with hope. We did. They were enveloped in the golden cocoon of warmth, a beacon of light dispelling shadows that once darkened their lives. They rose, looking around at the once cursed village, a place now free from despair. Faces rounded the edges, flickering between joy and eternity like gemstones brightening in the sun. They weren't forgotten, they were now reborn in remembrance. It's time to heal, together, Jamie breathed, determination threading through her words. As they stepped into the new dawn, Jamie and George realized that they had forged a new path for Lonesome Hollow. United, they planted their feet firm on fertile ground, flowers of recovery pushing through, and the curse that once chained them could not resist the power of love. Now, we share our story so this darkness never returns, Jamie resolved. They exchanged a knowing look. What lay ahead would be filled with challenges, yet bound together by resilience and purpose. There was an undeniable sense of freedom. In freeing Lonesome Hollow, they had found themselves. Both of them would never be alone again, and with that, a new chapter began, not only for them, but the entire town, a legacy centered on healing, rebirth, and, most importantly, light. So don't wait. You need to subscribe now to catch the tales that will keep your heart racing. Smash the like button now to show your love and feed the algorithm. Your reactions and theories belong in the comments section, so flood it with your insights. And don't forget, you must share this video immediately with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Let us keep the magic alive and uncover more incredible stories together.